I'll speak Russian if there are no objections. So, good afternoon, everybody. And I'll speak about myself. I'm Denis Izmайлов, and for the last 5 years, I have just worked with React applications and worked with Hello, React, and I spoke with Moscow GX several times, and I contributed to Brand Harp. And today we will speak about the following. Why single-page applications in its classical type should be discarded, and how the isomorphic applications will be actually impact your salary, and what are you going to do this weekend? I mean, starting Wednesday. So ideally, if you have any experience in working with React 14 Webpack and understand what is E6 and did something with Express Core and have some understanding of what is isomorphic apps, they are also called universal apps. So, part 1. Web has become very big, and designing to web, it's a thin line between science and art. It was easier previously. You just write a script on the server, you add a couple of JS, and then you send it to production, everything works. And the browser would do this request, and server will do everything, and then HTML page will appear, CSS was optional, and it worked. But then single-page applications started to change, and the code started to expand, the clientele part and server's role becomes smaller, and then the question was, do we have any access to this HTML page, and JavaScript bundle became dominant, and it was easy to start writing. You just tune Webpack and div ID root and this to the React Redux, and it works. And functionality is also rich. If you have single-page application, you don't want to care about anything. You can include everything, images and even video will be inside the bundle, and it will run. It's easy to improve, and you don't have to think about optimization, and you just add, and you add. And UI is very responsive. Everything is there, and it's easy to cache. And when you upload some bundle, it is there in the cache, and then this page is downloaded easy. Are there any minuses? Yeah, there are some demerits, as the bundle is very big, up to 3-5 megabytes, and it's very long. It takes long to download it first, and you see this kind of thing rotating on your screen, and you dislike it, of course. And first request takes long, and single-page application can support certain plugins which you add, and they impair any other pages, and we cannot maintain good quality and monitor it. And memory leak, nobody tests it if there is an application is long, so then it takes that this memory becomes more and more occupied, and they involved, and everything starts to go slow, and downloading is getting slow, and the browsers. Recently, research was carried out. Even in now, at 2015, all 5% of use Opera 12 and and other legacy browsers. Is this negative for businesses? Yes. Long downloading, it's actually the loss of UX, which costs a lot, and complexity of support. It's also an exposure to go beyond the budget, and empty page. It's the CEO problem. And then what about getting rid of this and how to address these issues? One URL, it's SMM problems. It means that somebody can share your page in the social media, and if this page is used on the old browser and you don't have polyfilled, then a person will just see an empty page using an old browser, and for the business it's also very bad. So we can take the best out of those two worlds and render it in isomorphic applications. In isomorphic, we mean that any given line of code, with notable exceptions, which can execute both on client and the server, with some exceptions. And then the question is how to divide it, how to convert it. And in this part, this templates and styles, and they all highlighted, and they are universal. But some small things like admin or customer's file, which is what customizes it, it is for the customer correction. For the server part, it's its own, and for the customer, it's also its own. Therefore, it looks as follows. We have a browser, and we have front-end server, and we have back-end server, and with the database, or without any server at all. And then the browser goes to the server, and then it refers the queries, the data, gets this data, and then renders a HTML. And critical CSS is actually rendered, and at the end, the bundle, part of the bundle comes, and then we have actually front end. We have a communication to the customer, and all in all, we have this unified medium of performance. And once the backup server uses Java, so backup server can introduce certain problematic issues, and not forget management. How to organize it? We use this server-side rendering. And the essence of it is that the collection of the entire React app happens at the front-end server. And at the same time, we're using this snapshot in browser, which looks like it's actually HTML code, and the user immediately sees it with the first query. And when JS is downloaded and it happens quicker, then everybody is happy. And the server part looks as follows. And we have certain renderer which is reactive, and it is 14th version of it. And we have our application, and it is all compiled in the line, and then it is transferred. And application has all the roots, and as we have the same code, then we know this path, and then all this image will appear. And then what we will have, the user will immediately see the page, and we don't have any additional queries to get data, because all data are collected and they are placed wherever it is needed, and the page can start even without GS, and even if something doesn't function in a perfect way, but still it will be working, and we will have also very good navigation level, and method tags will be also available, so it will allow us, especially for product histories, to share and to certain reference to particular pages, and it will be much more effective than when we have it with a hash. And at the same time, we will have all this actuality for JavaScripts. Now let's speak about the performance and scalability. Scalability is functional, and we are not talking about the loads, but how can we scale it up? Server-side rendering actually presumes that we have all the relevant data, and you understand that it's like a normal JavaScript, everything is fine, and we have this data, and it all fits one stream. But what if we need to get this data to make some query, and then we cannot lose this point? And there are three main ways to get to recover this data and then spoil the Facebook rally. And I actually worked on plugin for Catch Promise, and I'll tell about it later. But for every page, we are getting the state from the base database, and then we do the streaming, render to string. And for every page, we need to think about how can we get this data from server. We cannot just add a page. We need to extract this data and include it in the project, and that's not always convenient. And Facebook Relay, it's just released quite recently. It allows you to declare a special request on data provision, and you declare what kind of data you need and what are the conditions and what is the links, and then Relay accumulates it, and then you receive it in a bundle from the server. And the only problem is that with the server it's sometimes inaccessible. But in the first quarter of 2016, Facebook promises to implement this, and everything will be working fine. And you will be actually Redux Catch Promise. I did it working on a new project, and I spoke about it at Moscow. It's actually a container, and we actually replaced the Flux, and it's quite useful. And there is a reference to YouTube, and then what does it do? So we just get this callback for promise action, and then we do the render app, and the render components has the query, and then we send this action to receive this data, and we receive the promise, and the promise is at the upper level, and then we have a correction of promise, and while awaiting its resolution, completion, we get the data, and it becomes quite good. It's a compromise between the manual acquisition and what is available online now. And this is the reference to the hub, and we have quite a good example there. It's outdated because everything changes quite quickly, but now about the performance. When we started to examine to what extent it is quick at the regular laptop, page is 56 kilobytes. This is the way it looks, and this is its profile. And with all the data, we can test it, and we launch it, and we have the response in 61 milliseconds. Is it a lot or it is few? But if we compare it with Handlebar, it will be 8 milliseconds. So it is the difference is obvious. It's not super. So we now start to look in the Google, and we start to ask Twitter. Nobody gives you a definite answer what happens with it, and that at the same time, if we put the node and production, and then we immediately get the improvement in speed twofold. It's already better. It's not the piece of cake still, but it's good. Now we're coming to GitHub, and we find server rendering is slower with npm React. And there we have the extension which says that you need to don't take the photos. I'll explain you why. There is a solution that you need to use a Java file and min.js, and for testing we do this node modules, and we use min.js for, and what happens? We launch it again, and it's even slower than it was. So we believe it's not good. The test failed. So it happened to be it worked well with the previous reactor and not now. And Handlebar, it takes only 8 milliseconds to get the response, and with the rest of it we are slower, and we are slower by 39%. But what next kind of research we can do? We are not doing any hack in service rendering, but we need still to optimize it, and currently we have some hardware solutions, but it's not good. But if we define it globally, we can do the recompilation plus cache and divide the rendering, separate the rendering, and then quite recently we saw the plugin which is called React DOM Stream. We can use Facebook Big Pipe, and very interesting application, and Hub Proxy. It's also requires a special attention. But what is recompilation, and what's the essence of it? Is so if UI is a function of f state, and state is just a path, or if it is a site or a page or something else, so we can cache using this key what we need, and we use Redis. And if we need an immediate response, we can use Redis plus Q plus workers, and then we show some partial loading, and then our component is there, and then we will get what? In this case, the page will come immediately, and the next request we can actually receive the cached part. Rendering separation is quite an interesting feature. LinkedIn did research, and most of their pages are, especially long ones, are rendered. I don't need the full server, only just first visible part is needed, and then the rest can be downloaded later and slower. And in most of the cases, for LinkedIn, the customers sees only the first part, so we can show only the first part at server and render it immediately, and then download the next parts of it, and it gives us much better performance and uses less resources. And React DOM Stream, it's a new application. It was quite recently published, which is quite interesting. A person, he did this transformation of preemptive release. You render, and then you receive a text. But he managed to implement a technology when you get via HTML code, and which comes, and then it is being rendered, and it improves the performance. And the time to first byte gets down to 60 milliseconds, and then if we combine these two approaches, we are receiving a very good outcome. And the only minus is that the reactor needs to be upgraded, and they use Ford, and then it is not the official version of it. Now the discussion is going on this, and we can believe that soon this kind of solution will be available. Facebook Big Pipe, it was actually invented like 2 years or 3 years ago, and then this collection of the page happens in the course of downloading, so it goes concurrently, and therefore we have very good redundant stability of it, and robustness, and you just shape the query which are needed for this bundles, and all the data comes quite quickly. And with the first rendering we see this virtually full page, and we can see some important features like Yandex do. First, they show the upper part. In Yandex, when you do the search, you see this phrase, you press enter, and you will have the toolbar with your request, the query, and only later will you see the results of the search. And now we have this process, it's ongoing, and we can see it. What hub proxy, it's a DevOps solution. You can actually attune it or adjust it for your needs, and for production you need to have several options, and then select best one. Now just a few interesting materials, and my comment is that join the Moscow GS community, follow our updates, and we have many interesting events happening, and you need to improve your English, and listen to English presentations. Don't read Russian newspapers, write Soviet newspapers, read regional materials, and especially the latest most hot topics. And in Twitter you can see them all, and Twitter GitHub, it's probably most interesting site where you can actually keep the hand on the pulse. And I also would like to give you a quotation. So most of the issues relating to algorithm can be resolved by the replacement of the data structure, said Andrei Sitnik. Changes is our work, and it's another great quote I wanted to say. And Why we need to give up the single-page application? I believe I explained it, and it's not that difficult. And I urge you to move forward and be leaders in this. Thank you.
Денис, спасибо большое за доклад. У меня пара вопросов.
Dennis, many thanks for your presentation. I have a question. So this 5 megabytes bundling, how to attune it correctly? So there are some particular parts of applications to be downloaded later. That's a very extensive issue. I understand your concern, but actually few people can do it. Yes, you can optimize it, but if it is a very big project, and the second issue, some people told us that you resolved the issue with GSP, which server rendering, and now HTMLs are sent to a customer, and we resolved this, and then we did that, and everything works 4 times slower. But you see, GSP, whatever is rendering at servers, that's actually exactly server rendering what you offer us. Well, it offers a certain part. We have customers JavaScript application which is made by designers, programmers. They have a router and some certain windows and pages, and GSP does the same, HTML on server, and then it is returned by just query. But what about JavaScript, and what is being GSP will generate? A front-end designer, say, wants to show something, change the logic of rendering. Who will do it? It's site designer will do it. I changed my presentation several times, and I explained why it happened. What is the problem with a single page? One of the prerequisites what it was that content designers, in order to change something, HTML or whatever, they previously had to ask the server managers or interfere with the server designer, and which is quite often busy, and the value of it is not that high. If you simplify HTML, if front end is a content server which does that UE, then we see that server, what GSP does, it's not needed. We just need to get data, and then we will have better ability to customize. Thank you very much for your presentation. I haven't heard the question on the answer, which was made me stay. He said, what are the benefits of isomorphicity? Maybe you have increased the share of committed by the designers. We had a similar situation. We have a lot of content generated at the server, and we render Flash, and then in one of the day, client-side designers said, let's write something jointly. We said, okay, let's divide it into modules. You do this repository in the hub, and you write something there. And in 6 months, nobody committed anything, and we just gave up this approach, and we returned to classical architecture. Yes, when we tried it, you see, we saw the advantages, and from memory leak is one of the points when sometimes we do rendering HTML at a server, and from HTML on server, then not the entire page. looks like a single page. Everything works in the framework of one page, and we go section by section. We see these profiles, and it is all in one page. In this case, we divided the query into a new load, and like it is in Facebook, you go to feed, it's one page. You go to profile, it's another page, but you don't do any additional things. And it is actually within a mini single-page application. And talking about the bundler adjustment in EPAC, by chunking, we can separate it much more convenient. But rendering is much quicker. One has the advantage of isomorphic application, and the language is the same. We don't have to develop Java, and we don't need to synchronize in things, and what was server command is JSON APIM. In this case, we had optimization. So in your case, the customers, designers, they actually group or aggregate data, or yes, it's not that difficult for them, and everything moves to this. You don't have a customer designer. It is you have browser JS, and there is no there are some specialization remaining, but still. Okay, very good. May I ask you something? You said that one of the issues of single-page application is SMM. What kind of problem it is? Why can we not do a reference to each particular state of the application using HTML5 or using the hashtag? Okay, I understood you. What is SMM? It's actually this promotion in social media, and so sharing references. And we come to Facebook, say, and we publish a reference, and preview is generated from the Open Graph or through meta tags. In order to shape these meta tags, there are a lot of ways to do it from CRM. No, few ways to do it, and a server part is carried out by itself. And for isomorphic application, we follow the logic of it, and then we identify what is the description, what will be the preview, and we can control it, and we can support this. And this is what I wanted to tell you. And it doesn't actually has any impact on likes or share or whatever. My question is, whatever you spoke today is full tech topic, or GS actually is works only with this imaging logic? And a related issue, did you consider frameworks that DBGS they offer, what you are tolling? Meteor will be a good report we had at Moscow JS. It was in free access. I recall Derby, and I saw it a year ago, and they have a very exotic handling of memory, and quite big architectural changes were offered, which was hardly to use under big loads. Meteor use, Alexander told about it. It's good for a quick start, but there are some certain issues with support. I didn't go deep into it, but I didn't see certain attractive features. But your question was related to that the solution which you offer is it full stack, or it's a code which is responsible for business logic, or REST API is there. Well, it is the choice of the architecture. And you can implement RGS, and there are some serious things like data processing or billing, which is very good to implement based on JavaScript. And all this backend can be actually implemented on Java, and then the front-end server can interact with this easily. So I can take a ready off-the-shelf project, introduce this project, and get isomorphic applications. Definitely, you put inside the nodes. Actually, it's your server will keep it, and then you scale it up. And many people do it. Groupon, I believe, did it with Groovy, and they converted to JS. And on the first stage, the back end was beyond this servers, and Yandex was also migrated in a similar way. Thank you. We are using this technology and side rendering, great guys. And we also completed a number of projects, and we like it. But I didn't get one point: the principle of operation of promises. So they are implemented in Redux, React H, whatever name it is, React Express. It's middleware which, and then these promises come to the customer, and in essence, we have a core middleware which renders this component, and when we render it, before the render, we include callback in this promise in the middleware, and as soon as promise is dispatched, we catch it, and it means that our action, which gets the data, will be dispatched, and then hand out the promise. And in order to implement it, as soon as we have data downloaded, we will render this data. Okay, I will look at it in details. Please ask questions. In first quarter 2016, a relay is promised to be built, and you can actually migrate there, and this is, I believe, very interesting solution. Any other questions? Okay, then. We still have 45 minutes to go. Now we are closing this session on this front end. Badu will speak about mobile first, about the selection of framework. Everything will happen tomorrow at room number 1, and we start with 13:30. Yandex, Google will be there, and it will be excellent things. Thank you for your good question.